everyone. Thank you for being here. We're going to have a nice panel today. It's called Creating a Successful Writer and Story Editor Relationship. On stage, we have Josselyn-Hamilton, who's a director-producer. We have Alexander Nunez, who's actor, writer, producer. And we have Nadine Bhaba, who's also an actor, writer, and producer.
You're the creator, and you brought on Christopher Yip as your story editor.
Correct. Yeah, Chris was supposed to join us today, but he got into a writer's room, so he's not with us.
Must be nice.
I know.
So how did you find Christopher?
I'm a director-producer for a production company called Archipelago Productions, and we do a lot of different things, but we actually served as service production on Eva Grant's proof of concept trailer through IPF summer of 2023. And so then a few months later, we hosted a TIFF party in our studio, and Eva and Chris are friends. And so she brought Chris to the party, and we had heard about Chris's series, Streams Flow from a River, which came out last year and did very well at Cannes. We took a liking to Chris, and we were really into the work that he was doing. So he was sort of like top of our list, but met with a few different writers. A lot of them were really into sci-fi and horror, which is the space that I wanted to play in. But he very quickly got that this show wasn't going to have all the bells and whistles of typical stuff that you see in sci-fi, and wasn't going to look like a Marvel. It wasn't going to look like a Star Trek. And he just started asking about, okay, but like, what are the logistics about crossing between threads? And he just wanted to jump into the world and play. And I thought that was really cool. And we just got along really well. And that's how it happened.
Just for the audience, because it was such a well-made trailer.
Thank you.
Could you just give us a bit of like a gist of what the series Thread is going to be about?
Yeah. So Thread is about two young queer people who are lovers who must cross between many parallel worlds in search of love and freedom while running for their lives from an interdimensional hunter. So that's sort of the log line of the thing, and that's generally speaking what the show is going to be about.
And what was the process from concept to execution, and Chris's involvement with you?
Yeah, the general idea of the show has been sort of baking in my brain since somewhere around 2017, and then the pandemic happened. And when Omicron hit, I got it, and I was stuck in my room for many days, and I'm just really bored. I want to do a thing. So I started writing what was a short, and then I was hitting a roadblock and realized, oh, I think this wants to be the pilot episode of this thing that's been baking for a while. So I let myself explore that and ended up writing the pilot of Thread. And then when Chris came on, he was just really instrumental in sort of, Chris is he has this quiet confidence, and he's just very, very chilled out. And I told him this last week when we got on a call, and he laughed because he said to me, well, it's a swarm of bees inside, so the fact that it reads like this calming presence has taken a lot of work to get there. But he really does sort of offer that kind of energy, and was just really helpful in sort of quieting some of the noise. As a writer, I'm sure you guys know, there's a lot of busyness that can sort of come out, and he was just really helpful in tailoring that and always sort of like rooting it in what the show is really about. What is this that you're trying to say, and who are these people? And so it all just sort of came back to that every time we met.
I just wanted to ask a logistical question about Chris's role as a story editor on your project. And for any of you who aren't necessarily familiar with how IPF works, generally when a writer and a producer sign on to do development or go into production for a series, they typically have a story editor on board. And this title works differently from the way that a writer's room on a network production would be. The title can mean many different things depending on what you want it to mean in your production. Sometimes, depending on time and budget, they can be very, very involved in helping you shape your series. Sometimes they are there on a, draft by draft basis. So between you and Chris, what was sort of like the plan in terms of how he was going to be involved in your work?
Yeah, so by the time Chris had gotten involved, I knew going ahead, because part of IPF, as part of your development submission, you have to submit 3 scripts. So I had episodes 1, 2, and 3. I had drafts of them. And so when we brought Chris on, we knew we wanted his involvement in helping to edit those, and just offer, as someone who's really good at what he does, both as a director storyteller but also writer storyteller, we wanted to sort of have him lend his experience and insight to that. So he signed on to help us edit episodes 1, 2, and 3, as well as edit the proof of concept trailer script. So that is something that I did work on independently, and then he came on to help edit that. And so we had structured that each episode would get 4 weeks. It wasn't 4 weeks of solid work, but that was sort of the time frame that we were giving each other. He would get a draft. He would provide feedback. We were doing virtual calls at that time, so we'd get on an hour meeting. We would discuss the notes, we would talk it through, and then I would go away, do some work, send it to him, lather, rinse, repeat. So we did 4 weeks each episode. It was 3 rounds of revision, and then for the proof of concept trailer, it was 2 rounds of revision with 2 weeks in there. And that, I think that sort of generally maps out the structure of it, yeah.
Cool.
I just wanted to know a little bit about the personal aspects, I think, of this relationship. Because, I think a lot of you might know editing other people's work is very touchy, whether you're getting paid to do it or not. I'm sure you and Christopher, were friendly, like in a casual sense, but did it, how did you guys handle conflict in terms of when you disagreed on a note? Like, did Chris ever suggest anything that didn't necessarily mesh with what you wanted to do with the show, and how did you handle that?
I appreciate the way that you worded that too.
So wrongly worded.
No. I legitimately mean that, because I was thinking the same thing. I wanted to ask you guys the question as well, because how do you navigate feedback, and especially when feelings are attached to it, right? You're attached to the work that you do. But Chris is a very kind person, and clearly values communication, as do I. And so there was always sort of just like it always came from respect. And his notes were always about what he felt, what he understood the show to be about. It was always rooted in how do we make this the best version it wants to be. And I trusted that opinion. And it may have had something to do with the fact that we had such a great rapport, but it was a positive experience the whole way through. I know sometimes collaborations aren't so smooth, but it really was. If ever there was a note that I'd receive from him, which again was always so thoughtfully phrased, and often in the form of a question, I'm not quite sure this piece is landing, or this might be sort of pulling focus from some of the other things going on. How do we sort of like course correct, or what would be a better choice here? If ever he offered a suggestion that I didn't align with where I wanted to take it, I still always valued what he was suggesting and also what he was voicing in terms of this piece isn't quite working. So then we would work together to explore maybe different avenues or different other choices that might play here.
Yeah, because sometimes a note can like spark
Absolutely.
a different idea, even
Yeah.
if you don't take the note specifically.
Yeah, I always found that stuff fun. He's someone who, and he's said this as well, that he tries to do the work on himself so that nothing it comes out like from like a wounded or an emotional place. But I think we really just tried to meet each other in the middle there. Yeah, like communication is so important when it comes to those relationships, and I guess sort of the point of this this talk is like, how do you navigate that? How do you navigate the relational piece there? And I think just coming from a kind place, my takeaway is coming from a kind place, trying to understand the person in front of you too is just a helpful way to go about it. But it really depends on the relationship and the person.
And so it seems it's great, the luck that you've been able to get with Chris as a story editor, because so much of this process really is dependent on what two people are like as individuals, and whether or not they're willing to meet each other halfway.
Yeah.
Right? Has there been a situation even prior to Chris that you can speak to as a director-producer in which things maybe didn't align so well?
Sure. So before I focused as a director-producer, I had a whole other career as a script supervisor. So I was very used to being a mosquito in someone's ear. Like, it was my job to bring up issues that weren't working, or anticipate issues that the creators might find in the editing room. So gently saying, hey, this is what I'm noticing. I anticipate it might affect you this way, or you have these contradictions here. Is there something you'd like to do about it? I find oftentimes phrasing things as a gentle question and then giving the opportunity to the other person you're speaking to sort of make that choice is a helpful way of going about it. But there are often cases where I would raise an issue. I try to present a potential solution too, so that you're not just constantly bringing up issues, that you're offering some sort of means of solution. But oftentimes, they wouldn't want to do anything about it, or they saw things differently, and that's okay too. Understanding in that context that it's not my project, it's helpful, because then I can voice the thing that they're asking and paying me to do, but then leaving that control in their hands. When I spoke with Chris last week, he articulated something similarly. He said, it's a marathon and not a sprint. And in that, I don't think he was talking about timing or sort of compartmentalizing your energy, but realizing there is more benefit in sort of fostering a healthy relationship there, and focusing on that, as opposed to like dying on the hill of a particular note. And I think that's sort of the approach that he took. He talked about, this is your rock that you're rolling up the hill, and I'm here to help you, but I'm not the one directly pushing the rock. So it was funny that he said that, because I felt similarly when I'm there to support someone else in a creative position. This is their rock to push, and if I can help in my little way, then that's what I'm doing, and that's sort of the healthy boundary to sort of draw there.
Also, like, no one's right creatively.
Yeah.
Like, he can give you a note, you can take it or not take it.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it either works, or it kind of works,
Yeah.
or it doesn't. Like, you never know.
And it's so subjective too,
Yeah.
right? Like, what works for someone doesn't work for someone else. What works for some audiences doesn't work for other audiences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before we move on and switch things around, I just wanted to ask, what's next for Thread? Like, where are you guys right now in terms of your development? Yeah, what's the future of it?
So we've secured 80% of our production funding. Thank you. Am I allowed to share the number, Maeve? Yeah, this is Maeve. She's a producer on the project too and has been instrumental in its development. So it's $780K is our series budget. So we've got 80% of that. And thank you. We're hoping to secure the entirety of it by the end of the year, and then we'll begin the writer's room, and then we're planning to go to camera late spring of 2025.
And how many episodes is that for?
It's 8 by 11 minutes.
8 by 11, 88. That makes sense. Because like a regular like network budget for TV is usually $1 million to $1.5 million right now, so it's pretty good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm very fortunate. We have a team supporting us, so the fact that I work at this production company means that there's a little bit of infrastructure there baked into it. So I'm very grateful to them. And then, of course, there are other contributors. We also have two pretty great executive producers on board. We have Matt Hastings from Handmaid's Tale and Shadowhunters, and Naveen Prasad, who's got he's involved in a bunch of different production companies and organizations, but they're a duo, and they're helping us as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, can't wait to see it.
Yeah, so now we're switching over. So I turn the attention to you guys now. So Alex, I get you have some experience with IPF as well. Can you talk a little bit about how you've been brought on to projects, what that looks like, and how that kind of goes about happening?
Yeah, I've been involved in a few IPF projects on sort of both lines, I guess, of creation. My own written series is called Settle Down. It comes out on Out TV Valentine's Day of next year. And I was able to sort of be where you were in the place of being a writer working with a story editor. And mine was Izad Edamati, who is amazing and very, very funny. And Nadine is also playing a character on this show. For those of you who don't know, she is a Donald Glover of Toronto.
It's just
Don't think too hard about it, but she is. But on an editing level, I've just been lucky enough to know friends who were very passionate about their own ideas and who signed up for the program and were nice enough to think of me in an editor role. And yeah, so I've had a lot of luck just getting to be involved just in terms of giving my input to these really, really great digital series. Yeah.
Very cool. And Nadine, I know you've got like a little bit of experience with IPF as well, but of course you've been in a lot of writers' rooms too. We'll get into like the logistics of what that looks like for both of you, but could you speak a little bit too about like how do you get roped into projects? How do you sort of get joined with creators? What does that look like? How does that communication piece happen initially?
yeah, on the indie level, it's usually just your friends. So like make stuff with your friends because it will pan out one day. Mark Duplass right now is like, you have to make your own stuff and then sell it to Netflix. That's basically, I think, what everyone's trying to do. So my friends will bring me onto a project and I will usually story edit it for a nominal fee or for free if you really like it. In terms of working outside, like the next steps after indie, like WGC projects, I have reps. So when I get seen to get staffed in the States, for example, like that's up to them. But it's also a lot of just your friends, like people you know are staffing a room. Like I work on Children Ruin Everything, and that was through, I had pitched a show to New Metric Media, and then the person staffing Children was like, hey, do you want to come and interview for that show? And then getting brought back every year is because you like do a good job or whatever. So it's usually just like word of mouth.
Is that sort of like how you transitioned into that sphere too? Like, did you have that sort of story of starting small and then someone else got this bigger gig that you then got brought on to because of that relationship, or what did that look like for you?
Yeah, kind of. So I started off in a few web series rooms working as a story coordinator. I had a very traditional, as a writer, path. Story coordinators, you're at the lowest, you're doing notes, you're maybe contributing, pitching ideas, whatever it may be, especially in a comedy room. And then from there, yeah, I guess like my cohort sort of rising the ranks would bring me on to other projects. And now, I've run a room. So it's cool because like then I can bring other people on. Because nepotism is actually really cool when it's your friends.
That's great. Okay, we'll jump back more into that, what the writer's room looks like, but switching back to Alex. So when you've sort of joined a project, then what does the process look like? So what are sort of like the initial steps that happen once you begin that relationship, and then how's the process structured?
Yeah, well, usually, as Nadine said, a friend comes up to me about a thing that they're working on. And I'm always like, oh, this is great. Well, good luck.
Yeah, see you in 5 years.
Yeah, bye.
Yeah.
And then, they ask me if I want to story edit, and they show the material. And it is just a matter of, honestly, like whether I like the project enough to contribute anything to it, which is like a big thing. I think I used to do stuff like this as favors to people that I really, really liked, and then my input just wasn't good because I didn't have like my skin in the game on like what this was. So that's the first thing, is that like I usually have to connect to it in some way, because like it's digital media. You're not getting paid much to do it, so like you might as well want to do it. And then what happens from there is really up to what the writer wants out of me and what they're kind of able to afford. I just did this position. I just story edited on a digital series called Stories from My Gay Grandparents, which is a really funny series. It's out on YouTube right now, and it's free, and you should watch it. They were just in this period, they were like about to go to production, and they had a couple of months to sort of write out sort of 8 more episodes, like 10-minute long episodes out of 10. And it worked essentially almost like a traditional writer's room, in which every Monday they would board out their scripts, and I would just play Logic Police. It was like basically all I did. We got comfortable enough that like sometimes I'd throw out an idea or two, but it really wasn't my job. And then I saw and gave notes for every draft that they had leading up to production. And a lot of that really wasn't stuff that I was required to do, but I really, really loved the showrunners, and I was rooting for this series. But then there are other shows, IPF projects like Finding Green, which is something in the works by Heidi Lynch. And all they really required of me was to be remote and to read passes, or to do a pass on drafts as they'd write them. And overall, I think I maybe wrote 3 rounds of notes for that show. So it's really dependent on, like what the budget is in terms of development, and how little or how as much involved as they want me to be, within reason.
You were talking about sort of finding a way of sort of like connecting with the material too, and you'd mentioned before too, because Stories from My Gay Grandparents has a very specific tone. You were mentioning a little bit before about how that was specific, and how it's specific to the creators too, and entering into that space and writing for that tone. Can you speak a little bit about that? Do you feel comfortable with that?
Yeah. I think it's just like the weird thing about editing other people's work and giving it critique, is that it's their work and it's not your work. And it's very easy when you're making notes to go, well, this is how I would have written it. And it's not your job, because if it was, you'd be writing an episode of it. And that show, I remember sort of doing my round of notes for sort of the first couple of episodes, and I sort of just instinctually circle things as I write, and then I'll decide whether or not to really actually make a comment out of them once I've really thought about it. And on that show in particular, a lot of what I was realizing was that, like, I was circling things based on a feeling, but then I didn't have a real answer as to what was wrong with it. And so even if it wasn't my sense of humor, it was just something that I had to move on with, because it's all just a matter of taste, because comedy specifically is just so subjective. And I never submitted those notes. I kept it structural for a lot of that show. And then when we did the read-through, a lot of what I didn't understand in the script was hilarious when it was read out loud.
And also that's why a show Bible is so important, I think, because if creators are handing you a show Bible, and you connect to the material, you'll be able to understand the tone right away. Right. Like sometimes people ask me to, do notes or be part of shows with subject matter that I don't care about at all. But then if I can understand where they're coming from, you sort of adopt, a good story editor should adopt their tone pretty easily if the show Bible's good.
So when you join a writer's room, what does that look like? Do you start off by just sort of poring over the Bible, or how does that start for you, immersing yourself in that, and then how does the writer's room start?
So it depends, because a couple of the rooms that I've been in have been my own projects. But if I'm being brought on to something, for example, I only got brought on to Children and Everything in season 2, but they had all the locked episodes, so I was able to watch them all, and then I must have read the show Bible. Kurt's not in here, so I must have read it. Yeah, and then someone just tells you what it is and what the tone is, and sometimes there's something to watch. I feel like if it's maybe an IPF trailer, or I think that's what proof of concept is for, is to show people the concept and to have open communication about where it is and where it can go. And the thing about a room too is that you'll understand the tone once you start talking to everybody in a room. And it's really nice being brought on early, because then you can make the tone together. And sometimes it changes on the day.
That's something that I really relate to. One of the things that was just so great about Chris is he got the limited bit of info that he got. He got our Bible in process, or our creative deck rather, and he immediately got the tone, and that's so impressive. Do you guys have experience sort of being the one in the interview that got the tone, or being brought on because you connected with it in a way that the creator saw, or?
Yeah, I think for myself, I get hired a lot, mostly for comedy. So I think it's almost like people are seeking out your voice and your brain to be added to the mural that is that show. So in that sense, yes, because you're the missing piece of the puzzle of what the show could be like. So I don't know if that answers it.
No, I agree. I also do a lot of comedy, and right now, I'm in a comedy room, and before that room, did all this research. I read whatever scripts were readily available and did the tone check and all that, and I was ready with all these questions. And then all that interview was a vibe check. Mm-hmm. And it was just do we speak the same language was really the real point of that meeting. I do think that I do think a large marker of a lot of the drama side has been around the questions that you ask about the show, what about it specifically interests you, and how can you as an individual be a key piece in expressing that in the best way possible. But yeah, it's weird. A lot of those meetings are really just do you get me? And do I get you?
Yeah, and you'll get so surprised. I had a show in development with CBC and Jerry D, and it's like upon meeting Jerry, I'm like, what? Why do we understand each other so well? Because we're so different. And then we together found a tone for the show, which was really, really exciting.
That's interesting.
Because you never know on the surface like what it would be, and then once you start like developing characters, you're really like birthing real people, as pretentious as that sounds. And it's cool to like sort of a little bit of mom, a little bit of dad in there, like, you know, and then you, like something magical can happen.
So obviously part of that temperature check is making sure that you guys will get along. But then once, you know, it's pretty well established that that rapport is there because you're working together, then from there, when you do start providing notes, you start working together, what does that look like? How do you approach that aspect of the communication and giving your feedback? I know you touched a little bit on that, but can you dive a little bit further?
Yeah, I think like the writers in the room here kind of know the unspoken rules, right? Which is like, you know, to always like yes and never to sort of like yuck people's yums sometimes. And it like being in a room and pitching ideas is very vulnerable. I never not feel stupid when I'm like pitching something that I think in the back of my head could be amazing, you know. But so I think what I at least look for, like when at least I get to have a choice or a say in who I'm working with, is to cultivate an environment where we're sort of comfortable enough to pitch things, to not feel any kind of personal way if what you're offering is just not what the story needs. Like you just need to be able to take, especially from a showrunner, like a soft no, like real quick.
Yeah, I think like not being precious, giving or receiving notes is the key, because you just never know when something will actually work. And yeah, like it's not that serious. It's just TV.
Yeah.
We're not saving lives here.
The last room I was in, we had a sign up on the board and it just said, "It's not about you."
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
And I loved it.
Because there's also good idea, better idea. It's like you had a good idea, good for you. Someone might have a better idea, and allowing that better idea to flourish instead of getting like, you're gonna have to kill so many darlings along the way. So like pick your battles. And there are so many different, especially in network, or I'm sure even like at web series too, it's like you're gonna write a script and it's gonna go through a million rewrites, then you're gonna get producer's eyes on it, then you're gonna get network's eyes on it. There's just so many ways to something will die, so you might as well just like watch it flow.
You mentioned like, you know, pick and choose your battles. Which hills do you die on? How do you guys pick and choose your battles?
If more than 2 or 3 people have made the same note, I will take it. That's my rule.
Yeah, it's a pretty good rule. I come from like a copywriting background. I used to copyright before I really like wrote creatively. And so the whole gist of that job is you are taking every note no matter what, because you have this very specific client that you're writing for. And I like ruined my first TV development deal taking everyone's notes because I was like, this is surely what this job is. And the show that I was creating turned into just like such an awful like shadow of itself. And even still, I was like, it's what they want. And then the network was like, yeah, we hate this now. So a lot of the time, like you get notes, and sometimes people forget that they even make the note.
You have to be able to decipher what is a note and what is something someone said because they had nothing to say.
Yeah.
Or
but
like,
yeah,
what's the note within the note?
I hate that. There's no note within a note. Just say what you need from me.
I think sometimes there's a note within. I will say. I only say because of this. Sometimes, like, the note feels dumb.
Sure.
But sometimes that note can be a symptom of, like, a different or greater issue in
A
the
larger
script.
problem, for
Yeah,
sure, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. They don't know that when they're writing it.
Right.
But, like, I even take, like, I take all notes pretty seriously, even if my first inkling is like, this is like dumb. Because sometimes you go to bed and then you're like, actually maybe, okay, yeah, the way they wrote the note was dumb. But like, actually maybe there's a point to this. I think it's like that much is important.
The full emotional journey.
I'm a Gemini. Yeah.
Same.
Okay.
Two Alexes and Gemini. Okay.
I think it's Q&A time.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, it is. Sorry.
Does anyone have a question?
Great.
We'll just keep babbling. No. All right, let's just keep babbling then.
All right.
Sure, off we go. Okay, so we've been talking about the notes within the notes, navigating that. Before I think of a next question to ask, when you probably initially feel that no, that note is stupid, and then you marinate on it. What does that look like? Is that you felt a sting from the note that was silly, and then you have to sort of like process?
I think it's just ego. Like, I think the sting is like, ugh, you just don't get it, and then the second thought is like, or is it just not very clear? And I think it's definitely like a newer writer thing. Like, I remember feeling very defensive of my work when I was very new, and I look back at the scripts and they're terrible. But yeah, I think it's just a learning thing about not being precious, literally about anything, as we've said. And yeah, hi Maeve.
How do you navigate producer and network notes differently than you navigate notes from story editor and fellow writers?
I want to know this too, because I don't know this.
Well, in a writer's room, typically for a network show, like a story editor and a writer are very similar jobs. Obviously, like a writer is like a written by credit, and then a story editor usually group breaking a season. So like from writer to writer, it's just sort of like, sure, man, like whatever. But then your showrunner actually filters down network and production company notes. And then the note might be, this character feels petulant, can you fix that? The showrunner will go, I have a couple ideas, but why don't you take a crack at it? And then it'll go back to your showrunner, so you can, I don't know, it's just easier. It's like a cushion between you and the network, because ultimately, unless you're the creator of that show, which you wouldn't be the writer or story editor, you're just trying to serve the story. But as a creator, it's nice to lean on a story editor, because they might have a better idea, especially if you're in like, that's fucking dumb land, and they don't know what they're talking about sometimes.
Oh yeah. And even showrunners even feel that way sometimes, and then they have to take a step back. I think that it's very easy to villainize the people making those notes, because I think for a lot of things, of the way things are right now, like how tough it is to get content made in Canada just as a whole, and there sometimes does feel like a very us against them thing when it comes to writers and executives at that level. But all you can really do is remember the fact that they are still championing your show, and they want your show to be the best thing that it possibly can be. And even if you feel like sometimes their notes may be misguided, it's still good to read everything through. Sometimes a paragraph-long network note is really it really has like a very simple solution that just involves adding a little more clarity to what you're trying to convey. But it does take, I think, like a minute. Like, what we do in our current room is like, we'll read through the notes. We will sometimes like, that's stupid, like, yeah, and then we won't do anything about it, and then we'll follow through the next day with actual solutions for a lot of like the bigger things, especially when when there's one note coming from a network that echoes a note coming from the production company. And yeah, you don't take everything. And also, like, they don't always remember what they write.
There's also a way of like doing the note without doing the note, you know? Like giving them a solution that they didn't, that's not what they meant at all, but it helps serve the story better altogether.
I don't want to like poke at the drama bear, but is there a way that like do you have like sort of an example of that's appropriate to share on the stage, or
Like for a network or production company note that
like how to sort of like navigate that duality, because I get that, and we deal with that too. Also, you know, in all different kinds of projects that we do at our company, but yeah, how do you, if you know the project is better served not taking that note literally, how do you sort of ride that line, giving them a little bit of what you know they're asking for, but then also doing your job to ensure that the project's the best version it can be?
Yeah, so I think like depending on, well, there's 2 networks, so you know, whatever. Anyway, like a lot of the time you're gonna get a note that's something like, you know, where's the heart? Which is a valid note, but it also feels kind of academic in the asking. And when you're trying to write a comedy, of course you have to think about those things, but sometimes like it's like not the episode for that character to be soft or whatever it is. Like, you know, I'm rewatching Veep right now, and of course there's a lot of heart, but I don't think that was their like main priority. So it's like finding those teensy little moments in prose usually, so that network is satisfied that the character's experiencing it, but the audience might not detect that. And I think like there are subtle ways of having the network see their notes being incorporated, and then there are obvious ones. And then because it goes through so many phases, you can just take it out later if it really doesn't work.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
2 minutes. I guess as we close things up, do we sort of want to talk about what's next or what's exciting that's going on for you guys respectively?
You go ahead, Alex.
Okay. Yeah, well, I think I had already mentioned Settle Down. We have, you know, just kind of finished up our post-production, and I think people will hear news about it soon as we approach our release. So yeah, once you guys hear news of it, please follow and watch it. I am about to start production on Thursday for a CBC show called Small Achievable Goals. I helped on that show in a writing capacity, and then I like weaseled myself onto set because I was like, hey, you know who'd be good for this character we've been working on? Me. Yeah, so that's essentially it for me.
Great.
Yeah.
I'm in development, but there's nothing really to like, you know, how development is. Sort of just nothing.
You're busy though.
Busy working and
I creeped you on IMDb. I know you're busy.
Yeah, so just trying to get some stuff off the ground, working with Belle, working with some other creatives. We just attached, I have another show where we just attached Eric McCormack.
Ooh, congratulations.
So thanks. So we'll just, yeah, just trying to get stuff off the ground.
Very, very cool. Well, this has been really cool.
What about you?
Oh, well, Threads in the works, I mentioned earlier, we're likely to go to camera in late spring. We're very excited about that, so keep an ear out for our progress. And then just more work at the production company, lots of edits and stuff going on too, so it carries on.
Oh, I do have one. Children and Everything is on Thursdays, CTV at 8:30.
Hey.
Sweet, thanks guys.
Yeah, thank you all.